Well, hey there, Ruckus Makers. Today I'm joined by Martín Blank, a visionary educator, breathwork instructor, and educational consultant, specializing in whole school well being and teacher and staff retention. I mean, is there a better topic to talk about these days? Honestly, probably not. Martine's worked with over 15,000 students and 14,000 educators over the last 10 years in hundreds of schools across districts nationally. He uses positive psychology, stress management, and resilience training to help leaders fight staff burnout and turnover and create systems that enable school and district thriving. You could check out his work at schoolwellbeingsolutions.com. Martin, welcome to the show.
Danny, it's so nice to be here. I'm a big fan, and so excited to have the conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, let's start back in the day when you were a novice teacher and your students were outperforming the students who had the quote unquote best veteran teachers. And it wasn't that you were there in better instructionally, it's that you taught them how to breathe that led to their success. Tell us that story because it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah, sure. It was a fourth grade classroom, and as a novice teacher, as you may know, and many other people may know, your seniority point. There's a thing called seniority points when you come into a district, and you don't get to choose what class you get.
Yeah.
You sort of are given whichever class nobody else wants to teach, and so I was given a class of fourth grade students who were particularly difficult to work with historically. They had a string of long-term sub after long-term sub over the last two
Yeah.
years, and it was sort of a cohort of kiddos who had been left sort of abandoned by the system
Mm.
in a sense. And so I came in. I My vision for them was just, hey, let's see if we can get you a little bit closer to grade level, right? So we had reading levels at between first and second grade on average. We had just a, a lot of basic skills for academically weren't there. And of course, social emotionally weren't there. And so I had just come from not the traditional teaching path. I was there on an emergency credential in
Right.
California after teaching thousands of students with the International Association for Human Values. I taught thousands of students how to breathe and do stress management around the country in different
Mm.
schools, which was a phenomenal experience. And so I said, okay, let me see if I can do this in a classroom. And so these kiddos, I came in and I knew the one thing I knew how to do very well was establish a routine for breathing. Sounds really weird. I'd start teaching this to many different kids, many different classes, and the first thing they'll say is, "Well, I already know how to breathe. Like, if I didn't know how to
Right.
breathe, I'd be dead. Like, what do you mean you're going to teach me to breathe, right?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, then we start sharing and exploring that breathing consciously is a little bit different than breathing unconsciously. It's kind of like
Mm.
knowing how to brush your teeth versus just throwing a whole bunch of water in your mouth and hoping for the best. So um, we established mental hygiene as importantly as we as kiddos viewed physical hygiene, dental
Mm.
hygiene. So we came in every day and we would practice these breathing practices. And what I saw at first is their their ability to stay focused with the practice was very limited. So after like 8 to 10 seconds, somebody's banana would end up on somebody else's head, and then we'd be
Yeah.
like, all right, that's the end
Splat.
of today. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
splat. So then
No, no,
we'd
begin again. We're done today. Let's move on.
right. Yeah, that's it. That's what we can handle, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
and I would always make it sort of I never made it an obligation. It was always a privilege and sort of couched
Mm.
around empowerment terms. And so anyway, so the outcome of this was that I started seeing their ability to focus on the breathing sort of bleed into their ability to focus academically. and their ability
Right.
to not take things so personally if there was a conflict. And
Mm.
so
Hmm.
so specifically in terms of reading, I saw that their reading stamina improved, their ability to sit with something frustrating yet necessary, which is a
Yeah.
lot of school, unfortunately,
Mm.
increased. And so after a few months, their reading stamina is improving. They were able to sit with frustration. They, I'm happy to say that the average reading score at the end of that year was middle of third grade. So it wasn't exactly um,
Hmm.
fourth, but we had come a long way. We'd come almost 2 years on average in improvement. And I
Yeah.
wasn't an expert reading teacher. Like
Right.
all I was doing was giving them the tools to sit with frustration and be able to focus despite
Be able to
distraction.
focus.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned it being like a privilege. Can you dig into that a little bit more? Because I'm not, I understand what the word means, but I don't, I want to be brought into the context of the classroom where it was a privilege to do this.
Sure, yeah. So setting up a breathing practice with them, sort of, you can make it or break it depending on how you know your tone of voice or how you go about doing it, or if you're
Hmm.
making it a punitive thing where you're forcing everybody to do it. So my philosophy there was, look, this is something not a lot of students are getting the opportunity to do during their school day, but it's
Mm.
essential. And the
Mhm.
question I would often ask them is, do you want to be your own boss, or do you want other people to be your boss for the rest
Wow.
of your
Yeah.
life? And when you ask that to a fourth grader, I mean, every
Yeah.
fourth grade, well, almost every fourth grader, in my experience, is going to say, yes, I want to be my own boss. I want to be powerful,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so then it's just a matter of like, okay, well, what do we need to do in order to increase our power as individuals? And that's where the challenge came in. Like, are you able to observe your breathing? Are you able to
Mm.
change your breath? Right? If you're able to change your breath and manipulate your breathing, then you're able to control your body. You're able to control your mind. You're able to decide what you want to focus on, how you want to respond to situations. Um, so that was a lot there. But I think, coming back to your question in terms of privilege, I think the kiddos felt that, and
Mm.
it was always done in a supportive, um, encouraging way. So I think they got a lot out of it.
Well, I really like the framing of do you want to be your own boss? And so not only is this important to fourth graders, I think if you asked adults this too, right? They would resonate with that message. So that's really cool. And I heard that they were able to focus more, struggle in how they related to challenging stuff. They'd be able to navigate that more effectively and be a lot less reactive. So they were their own boss. Can you explain though a little more about the connection between um, breath and emotions?
Yeah, that's such a cool question. So I the other day I did a session for a group of educators and administrators and counselors in New York City. It was part of the Innovation Education Conference. It was so much fun, and
Hmm.
the whole thing was about um, it was about heart rate variability and using that to help people manage their stress and biofeedback and all this stuff. But that's sort of uh, parallel. One of the activities I did with them was I put up on the projector screen a list of, I think, 10 or 11 different emotions, right?
Okay.
Anger, frustration, embarrassment, joy, uh, nervousness, fear, all kinds of things up there. And then I had them partner up, and one partner would act out an emotion on that list, and the other partner would have to guess which one they're acting out. But it's like charades. You can't say anything. You can only act non-verbally. And so
Okay.
they would do it, and then I'd say whoever guessed the most, whoever partners had the most guesses right, win. I haven't decided what they won yet, but the point was, you have this game where people are teaching each other what it looks like to have a certain emotion, and then I'd ask them, well, what did you use to teach, like what tools, what gestures, what did you really use to help communicate what emotion you were feeling? I would ask this to the winners,
Hmm.
and I would get things like, oh well, my gestures, like my hands, my physical, my emotional sort of expressions,
Okay.
and so there's all these different things that you can observe, of course, when we're feeling emotions, and there's some things that you can't observe. And what's really cool, nobody said this. And I was like, well, did anybody use their breathing in order to communicate an emotion? And
Hmm.
people were like, oh, actually, yes, people realize, oh, yes, I do use my breathing. For example, if you're communicating fear, you might go, or
Yeah.
if you're communicating anger, you go, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
really intense breathing. And so this goes back, and there's research that was done in Belgium a few years ago that shows that people who are experiencing similar um, emotional experiences, right? Experiences similar emotions, um, have a certain pattern or a rhythm of breathing in general
Hmm.
that correlates with that emotion. So
Gotcha.
anger is more forceful exhale. Calmness is just a gentler breathing. Joy is associated sometimes with a more prominent inhale. And
Hmm.
um, what was really cool is the study B was that they said, all right, well, let's reverse this and see if we ask people to breathe in certain ways, can we also get them to feel certain things? Does it work in
Right. Yeah.
reverse? And it turns out that it does.
Hmm.
In a statistically significant degree, it really does. There's sort of a um, medium correlation, medium strength correlation there. So this is all to sort of tell us something that we all know intuitively. When we're angry and somebody says, take a deep breath, and you want to slap them across the face, but really they're right. They're right. They
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
if you do
They're
take a
right.
deep breath, you're able to calm yourself. So there's a connection. It's like I call it like a physiological footprint for every emotion.
Hmm.
Every emotion has a
Yeah.
physiological footprint, whether that's your breathing, whether it's your digestive system, whether it's your hormones, whether that's your perspiration, whether that's your emotional expression, so some observable,
Hmm.
some unobservable. And what's really cool about breathing is that unlike digestion or unlike heart rate, or unlike your hormones, you can decide in a split second to
Hmm.
have control over it. You have some
You can
type
be
of
the boss.
management over it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, exactly.
that's really cool. So in for leaders too, I mean, obviously we're talking about, you know, some of the impacts. I mean, you were doing a conference, so there were educators there, but we're talking about students. But I'm in a high stakes situation as a principal, and I'm not liking, let's say, the way a parent is approaching me about something they're frustrated with, and I might be feeling fear or embarrassed or stress or whatever. And what I'm hearing you say is, if I've intentionally focus on the breath, I can change my relationship to that experience and change my emotional state as well to be one that would be more positive and hopefully helpful in the situation. So that's fascinating, fascinating. And just Maria Irene is saying that this is an interesting conversation and activity. So really great. Thank you, Maria Irene, for the comment. So before the break, I want to ask you one more question. And you founded School Wellbeing Solutions, right? And so, can you tell us, Martine, what's an exciting project that you're working on over that there at School Wellbeing Solutions these days?
Sure. Yeah. So you mentioned, I think it's really cool that you mentioned this sort of situation with a leader who is faced with an angry parent, right?
Yeah.
And what they can do in that moment, and how their emotional experience manifests in their skill in action. And so
Hmm.
I think that just like so, school well-being solutions, we do a few different things related to staff well-being and retention, but the primary buckets are in increasing the resilience of leadership and staff, and
Mm,
also help once the resilience is there, then helping them establish systems that don't require more and more and more and more resilience in order to stay in the systems, right?
okay.
So now you've got your resilience, you've got your healthy positive mindset. How can we use that to create systems that are upward spirals of well-being? And so
Mm,
what an exciting project you asked about is, I'm working with a school district, a couple school districts, on what I call uh, resilience journey for leaders. And so what this is, uh, it's an 8 session journey, and we start with uh, what is resilience and what are you going through? How are your pain points associated with your level of stress, and how do they feed off of each other? And then go into a few positive psychology topics like thinking traps, character strengths, mindfulness, breathing patterns, heart rate variability, and biofeedback. And then once we've really established sort of routines that help us be our best selves, then how do you take that knowledge and infuse it into your work and
okay.
create systems that are nutritious for the well-being of your staff, and so thereby improving retention, positive school climates, and well-being for everyone at the school.
Awesome. Well, I'm enjoying our conversation, Martine. And when we get back after some messages from our sponsors, I'd also like to ask you about your weekly Thriving Educator series, too, if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to talk about it.
Learn how to successfully navigate change, shape your school's success, and empower your teams with Harvard's certificate in school management and leadership. Get online professional development that fits your schedule. Courses include leading change, leading school strategy and innovation, leading people, and leading learning. You can apply today at betterleadersbetterschools.com/Harvard. This show is also proudly sponsored by TeachFX. And I love TeachFX for a number of reasons, but I want to highlight just two right here. One, TeachFX at the classroom level helps teachers see and celebrate moments of brilliance in the classroom. And who doesn't want to celebrate more brilliance that's happening? We know it's happening. It's important to amplify these messages. Also, in terms of being a principal, you can't be everywhere all the time. But with TeachFX, you could actually multiply yourself and scale giving effective feedback, not in evaluative terms, but in terms of helping your educators grow. And I'm really excited to let you know that Ruckus Makers can pilot TeachFX for 2 weeks for free if you go over to teachfx.com/BLBS. And finally, today's show is sponsored by Organized Binder, which is a program which gives students daily exposure to goal setting, reflective learning, time and task management, study strategies, organizational skills, and more. Organized Binder's color coded system is implemented by the teacher through parallel process with students, helping them create a predictable and dependable classroom routine. You can learn more at organizedbinder.com. And we're back with Martín Blank, who is the founder of School Wellbeing Solutions. We're talking about an exciting project he's working on before the break, and that had to do with resilience. I know, and correct me if I'm wrong too, please. But you had a program called the Weekly Thriving Educator Series, and so if that's still going on, what's that all about?
Yeah, so Weekly Thriving Educator Series is an opportunity for a variety of individuals that work in K-12. So not just teachers, but staff, support staff, administrators who want to join, to be immersed in a sort of regular, ongoing conversation about different evidence-based strategies and tools and resources for resilience and well-being. It's
Yeah,
sort of in answer to the a problem that you'll often hear in the world of professional development, which is then what? So we come
yeah, yeah,
in, we
yeah.
do a great day, everybody has fun, everybody feels at the top of their game, and then they're like, all right, well, this is great, and things sustain for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then stress gets the best of us, we go back. So it really, this is a group that's helping people feel accountable, and just keeping this top of mind over and over again, especially with
Mhm.
a group of people who want to incorporate positive psychology. So we're gonna launch officially. We're doing a small pilot now with a small group of folks, but we're gonna launch officially in
Okay.
September. And we're spending the summer really cooking up a very, very
Mm.
strong flow, and different educators and positive psychology practitioners are going to be the leaders of that. So if you're interested, I'm happy to share more and be in touch about it with anybody.
Great. And yeah, where should we direct them? Should they just go to schoolwellbeingsolutions.com to learn more about that, or is there something better?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, website has information, and has our contact info there as well.
Okay, cool. Uh, I think you believe that, in education, we forget that we have anything of value below the neck. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there's what I call a below, I'm above the neck sorry, let me start over. It's above the neck bias, right? So
Okay.
we sometimes forget, especially, the pandemic sort of reinforced this, because everybody sort of became boxes on a screen. And you can't,
Mm,
and people loved it because you don't have to wear pants, or you could wear your pajamas or whatever. But really,
right.
there's and school sort of is designed to reward people who can um, who can think quickly, analyze quickly, agree and support their arguments, disagree and support their arguments. But there's so much more that actually
Yeah.
is conducive to happiness, right? And so let me back
Mm,
up for a moment. There's certain skills in every job that are great for doing that job, but they're terrible for your own level of well-being and happiness and satisfaction. For example, a
okay.
lawyer. A lawyer is great at arguing. If he takes that same skill and brings it into his relationship,
Good
it's not going
luck.
to fare, yeah, it's not going to be very well. It's also an unfortunate statistic that there's a high level of attorneys that are suicidal and
Mm,
depressed and alcoholics. And so you have to sort of ask the question why. And a lot of times it's because we sort of we train so hard. We put so much attention and focus on developing the skills that will take us far in our careers, but those skills are antithetical to what will take us far in our lives. And so um, in terms of how this applies to schools, right? When you
mhm.
ask a group of administrators or a group of teachers, well, what is the purpose of education? Why are we here? What are we doing? Typically, you get answers along the lines of, well, I want my students to be happy. I want them to be contributing positive members of society. I want them to be self-sufficient, independent. You know, successful, whatever that means for different folks. So if we want those things, then we have to take a really hard look at what we're doing day to day, and if what we're rewarding is going to get our students there. And typically
Mm,
what we reward in schools are skills that, yes, they're important. They're intellectual skills like analyzing, and the ones I mentioned earlier, agreeing, disagreeing. But those skills are not always helpful for our well-being. What is helpful is learning to, what I call, how to develop your noticing muscle, right? So hashtag noticing
okay.
muscle. Um, your ability to, we were talking about mindfulness earlier, which is awesome,
Yeah, yeah.
David. Um, uh, uh, sorry, did I call you David? Daniel, sorry.
It's all
Um,
good.
and so
I might call
what's
you Martin at some point, so we'll be on the
good?
we're
Okay,
even. We're
please,
even.
please, please do that by the end of today, so that way I could sleep tonight. No, but
It's all
all
good.
jokes aside, there is the noticing muscle is this ability to be with an experience without the need to react, without the need to
Sure.
agree
Yeah.
or disagree, or so that
Mm,
ability to just notice before responding is something that,
right.
you might agree we're sort of losing a little bit as a culture.
Hmm.
And it's manifesting in social media feuds and siloing and people misunderstanding each other and jumping to conclusions and not even knowing that you've jumped to a conclusion, or not
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
knowing that you agree or disagree with something because it's so automatic. So those are the skills that lead us towards division, lead us towards conflict, lack of support, loneliness, and ultimately mental health concerns or mental illness.
Hmm.
Whereas what doesn't lead us there, which is ideally the purpose of education, is noticing, is this ability. So that was a lot, but I thought that was it. Uh, yeah, I think that's interesting to me. I think about that often.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the political climate and the challenges and stress that ruckus makers face on the day to day, this almost unconscious reactivity, right, that they're experiencing, this noticing, I know will resonate, with them. So for sure, you should check out what Martine's doing at schoolwellbeingsolutions.com. So let me ask you about paradox. I think this will be my last question before we do the
Sure.
three I ask all my guests. But you're perfectly situated to weigh in on this. We have school leaders and educators who are exhausted, right? And in they need to take care of themselves, and they know this, Um, but then you might offer them some kind of self care training, and
Right.
they'll roll their eyes, or emotions and breathing. They'll go, "Ugh," right? What's what's going on there? If they know they need it, we all know they need it. Then it's offered, and people are like, "Oh, this is stupid." And how might we switch that reaction to?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple sort of topics that might relate to that. One is this idea of um, drowning, right? Because that's what's happening. People are drowning.
Hmm.
They're drowning in
Yeah.
demands, and they
Mm.
don't have a life jacket. They don't have resources, whether those resources are time, whether those resources are money, staff. I mean, resources are limited, demands are high. That's a recipe for stress, right? And so
Mhm,
if somebody's
mhm.
drowning, is that the moment to teach them how to swim? Is that the
Right.
moment you say, "Hey, let me teach you backstroke. You'll be fine." Just no, man, they're drowning. They're in fight or flight. They're like, if you
Yep.
don't like physically take them out of the water, then then they might die, right? And so
Mm,
trying to just do self-care is in an environment of toxicity, an environment of high levels of stress, um, high levels of demands, low levels of resources, is akin to that, and it's a little bit. The word might be um, tone deaf, right? So you walk into a room and you're like, "Hey, everybody, let's. Have you ever tried how to? Have you ever tried yoga? You probably would feel better. Or have you? Maybe you just start drinking a little bit more water. People are
yeah.
like, what? This guy, like, he's so he's not tethered to our. He doesn't understand. And so I guess this is more of a message to folks that are leading PDs and folks that are um, change makers. Really meet people where they are and see, okay, what do I need to do right now? Maybe I'm not at the thriving yet. Maybe I'm just at surviving,
Mhm.
right? So let's get to
Got it.
surviving and then we'll move to thriving. And so that's the paradox here. So, and the other thing I would just share is that, you know, when we're in fight or flight, we tend to see we tend to place higher value on things like firefighting, on things like um, quick solutions, on just
Mhm.
taking care of what's most painful because we need to deal with that, and we get into this addictive rut of continually just firefighting no matter what, even if the thing can wait a couple of days. It's firefighting because we're in that mindset, we're in that mental space, and that's how we're operating. And I've seen this with tons of leaders over and over again. So the art or the skill, if you're a coach or if you're a trainer, is being able to help leaders move just gently out of that for a moment and just say, hey, just want you to know that when you're ready to operate strategically rather than reactively,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be here and we can do the work. And I completely understand if there's things that need to be attended to and there are emergencies, staffing shortages or whatever needs to happen. At the same time, if you want to reduce your long-term pain points so that next year you're not in the same turnover or staff recruitment headache,
Yeah.
then we do need to put a little bit of attention on those sustainable strategic moves that will get us to where we want to be next year.
Brilliant. Cool. So, Martine, if you could put a message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be?
Yeah, I thought about this. I think I mean, there's so much, right? Like, probably give you a list of like 28 different messages to put, one for different day of the month. I might put something like cultivate peace. I
Hmm.
think that there's, yeah, that's kind of what I stand for is in inner peace, and then the what follows from that is your ability to cultivate peace externally.
And if you were building your dream school, there were no constraints in terms of resources. The only limitation was your ability to imagine. How would Martine build his dream school? What would be the three guiding principles?
Yeah, that's another really good question, which means that it's hard to answer. So those things typically go hand in hand. One is, I guess, the priority for me would be, in yoga, there's this concept. Um, um, I might be totally butchering this. Yoga Sukham Asanam. No, I'm butchering it. Don't quote me on that. But I have a couple of the
Okay.
words, and it's Patanjali's sort of the father of modern yoga.
Hmm.
Uh, is this idea of balancing effort with gentleness or with joy,
Hmm.
with enjoyability, and and so when you're doing an asana, when you're in a pose in yoga, whatever you're doing, yes, there should be a level of effort, but it shouldn't be painful, right?
Hmm.
And so remembering that, how that applies to schools is when you're learning, it should not be a painful process. It should be enjoyable.
Hmm.
And that's going to rekindle the spark that leads to lifelong learning and that leads to wanting to learn more and building intrinsic
Right.
motivation, which is what we all want. We want kiddos to have intrinsic motivation so that we can stop bribing them and get to facilitate and get to expand and get to remove the obstacles for them. Um, and that's not where we are now, but that would be a guiding principle. Um, and then another one which would be respect for the developing mind, right? So
Hmm.
very aligned there, very similar. And then the third one would be to um, question everything, but do it with kindness.
Yeah. Love it. We covered a lot of ground today, talked about a lot of really important topics. Of everything we discussed, Martine, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
Yeah. Um, I want people to remember that that they matter. I want you to remember that you matter. Often we forget that, and
Mm.
when we forget that we matter, then we're not able to do our best to be the best versions of ourselves, to do good work. And mattering has two components. Okay, mattering is contributing and feeling valued for your contribution. And so, if that's not happening, I would encourage you to troubleshoot that. Get in touch with me. I'm happy to support. I'm sure Danny's happy to support there as well. Um, there's so much to be said, but that's what I'll end with is just saying you matter. Chris Peterson one of the founders of positive psychology, says other people matter. And by that subset of other people includes you. And
Mm.
so I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for these awesome questions, Danny.